Do you keep your refrigerator well stocked, thinking you're doing the right thing for your health? I used to believe the same. For nearly 60 years, I kept a home, cooked for Harold and our 3 children, and I thought I knew exactly how to care for the people I loved. Shopping carefully, reading labels, keeping things cold so they'd stay fresh and safe. I was proud of my kitchen. I still am. But there are things I wish someone had told me sooner. Things that would have changed the way I stored food every single day of those 60 years. Doctors, nutritionists, and neurologists are now warning that certain everyday foods stored the wrong way inside our refrigerators can quietly release compounds that have been linked to cancer, to dementia, and to serious damage in the digestive system. These aren't rare or exotic foods. They're the things most of us buy every week without a second thought. And the danger isn't in the food itself. It's in what happens to the food when we handle it the way we've always handled it. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 5 of these foods. And I want you to understand why, not just follow a list, but truly understand what's happening inside that food and inside your body when these mistakes are made. Stay with me until the end, because the last item on this list is something I stored in my refrigerator for years without ever suspecting anything was wrong. When I learned what it was actually doing, I felt something between surprise and a kind of quiet grief. All those careful meals, all that love and intention, and I simply hadn't known. Let's begin. The first food is processed meats. Ham, salami, bologna, pepperoni, the kind of thing that sits in the back of so many refrigerators, wrapped in plastic or tucked in the deli drawer, ready for a quick sandwich or a warm breakfast on a slow morning. Here's what most people don't realize. When processed meats are refrigerated or frozen for extended periods of time, the fat inside them begins to oxidize. That oxidation process is already a concern on its own. But when you then take that meat and cook it with heat, fry it in a pan or heat it up in the oven, something more troubling happens. The oxidized fat reacts chemically with the nitrites that were used to preserve the meat in the first place. And what they form together are compounds called nitrosamines. These are directly and repeatedly linked in research to cancer of the stomach and intestine. Not as a distant or theoretical possibility, as a documented, measured connection studied across decades of food science. I think about all the Sunday mornings I fried up a few slices of ham that had been sitting in the refrigerator since Thursday. I didn't think twice. It was breakfast. Harold liked it with eggs. The children liked it. It was ordinary and familiar and warm. That's the most unsettling part of this. It doesn't announce itself. There's no warning smell, no visible change, nothing that says stop. The harm just quietly accumulates over months and years in the lining of the stomach and gut, in ways the body can't easily undo. If you buy processed meats, try to use them within a day or 2 of purchase, and be very cautious about freezing them with the intention of cooking them later at high heat. If you must keep them, low and gentle heat when reheating is far safer than a hot pan. And if I'm being honest with you, I've simply come to eat much less of it than I used to. Some habits, once you understand them clearly, stop feeling worth the risk. The pleasure of that Sunday breakfast starts to look a little different when you understand what's forming in the pan. The second food is something almost no one questions because it seems so obviously sensible. Open canned goods stored in the refrigerator, still in the can they came in. I did this for decades without a moment's hesitation. You open a tin of tomatoes, use half, cover it loosely with foil, and put it back in the fridge for tomorrow. It feels tidy. It feels responsible. But here is what is actually happening inside that can. The moment it's opened, moisture begins accelerating a process called leaching. The liquid inside the can, now exposed to air and in contact with the metal walls, begins pulling tiny amounts of aluminum or tin directly into the food. The longer the food sits in the open can, the more metal migrates into what you are eventually going to eat. And the cold temperature of the refrigerator does not slow this process. In certain conditions, it actually makes it worse, because the condensation inside a cold refrigerator adds even more moisture to the equation. Heavy metal accumulation in the body is one of the most studied triggers for Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia. Researchers have been tracking this connection for years, looking at how chronic low-level exposure to metals like aluminum gradually affects the brain's ability to function, to form memories, to protect its own tissue from damage. It doesn't happen quickly. That's part of why it's so dangerous. It happens slowly, invisibly, in a refrigerator that looks perfectly clean and ordinary. Have you ever thought about how many times over the years you've put an open can back in the fridge? I'd ask you to sit with that question for just a moment. The fix is so simple, it almost feels too easy. Transfer any unused canned food immediately into a glass container with a proper lid the moment you open the tin. It takes 30 seconds, it costs nothing, and it removes the risk completely. This is one change I feel certain about. Glass doesn't leach. Glass doesn't react. Glass is simply safer, and after everything I've learned, I won't go back to the other way. The third food is fried leftovers. Anything you've cooked in oil, chicken, potatoes, fish, sliced vegetables, and then placed in the refrigerator with the intention of eating it again the next day or the day after. Here is the problem, and it's a chemical one. Oil that has already been heated to frying temperatures is in an unstable state. The frying process itself begins a chain of oxidation in the oil. When you then refrigerate the food, the oil does not stabilize or rest. It continues to oxidize slowly in the cold environment. And when you take that food out and reheat it, whether in a microwave or back in a hot pan, you trigger a second wave of chemical transformation. What forms in that process are trans fats and a range of inflammatory compounds that researchers have linked directly to damage in the arteries and to inflammation in the brain. For people our age, this matters in a particular way. Our cardiovascular systems and our brains have already spent decades doing their work, absorbing life stresses, repairing what they can, managing what they can't. We don't need additional inflammatory pressure coming from the food we eat to recover from a long day or simply to get through the week. Fried leftovers feel like wisdom, like thrift, like care. I know that feeling well. The sense of not wasting, of stretching what you have, of honoring the effort of cooking. I understand it completely, and I still feel it. But what I've come to believe, clearly and firmly, is that some things simply aren't worth reheating. A small, simple, fresh meal is kinder to the body than yesterday's fried food returned to the heat. If you love fried food, and I do, eat it fresh. Make it a small meal. Eat it while it's good, and don't plan to save it. Your arteries and your memory will be quietly grateful for that one small adjustment, even if they can never tell you so directly. The fourth food stopped me completely when I first read about it. Cheese stored in the refrigerator, wrapped in plastic film, which is exactly how most of us store cheese, exactly how I stored it for my entire adult life without ever once questioning it. Cheese is a high-fat food, and fat, chemically speaking, is particularly reactive with certain synthetic materials. When plastic wrap, especially varieties containing BPA and other related chemical compounds, sits in direct contact with the fatty surface of cheese inside a cold refrigerator, microplastics and chemical residues from the plastic migrate directly into the cheese. This isn't a theoretical concern. Studies have measured the transfer. They've quantified it. The chemicals in question are classified as endocrine disruptors, meaning they interfere with the body's hormonal systems in ways that are difficult to detect, but very real in their long-term effects. Several of them are directly associated with elevated cancer risk, particularly in hormone-sensitive tissues. I want to be honest with you about how this one made me feel. It made me sad, because I always thought of cheese as one of the simple good things, something I'd arrange on a wooden board with crackers and a few grapes when Anne or Susan came to visit on a Sunday afternoon. Something wholesome and uncomplicated. The cheese itself is still fine. The cheese is not the problem. The problem is the plastic it's been pressed against inside a cold refrigerator for days at a time, releasing its compounds into every surface it touches. The answer is straightforward. Store cheese wrapped in wax paper or parchment paper instead of plastic film, or place it in a glass container. Wax paper allows the cheese to breathe slightly, which actually preserves its texture and flavor better, while keeping the surface away from synthetic chemicals entirely. It's a small change, but given what we now know about endocrine disruptors and their cumulative effects over time, it's a change I've made permanent in my kitchen, and one I would quietly encourage you to consider as well. And the fifth food on this list is, I think, the most universal habit of all: leftovers stored in the refrigerator uncovered, in open bowls or on plates with nothing more than a loose piece of foil draped over the top, or sometimes nothing at all. When food sits uncovered inside a refrigerator, two things happen at the same time, and both of them quietly work against you. The first is that the vitamins and natural compounds in the food begin oxidizing rapidly as they're exposed to cold air. What was genuinely nourishing the night before loses nutritional value with every hour that passes uncovered. You may be eating something that looks the same and tastes nearly the same, but has been quietly depleted of what made it good for you. The second thing is more surprising, and it troubled me more when I learned it. Uncovered food in a refrigerator begins absorbing gases released by other foods sitting nearby. Those gases are the natural byproducts of decomposition. Every piece of aging fruit, every vegetable beginning to soften, every leftover that's a day further along than it should be, they all release gases as they break down. Your open bowl of soup or your uncovered plate of roasted vegetables is essentially breathing those gases in, absorbing them into its surface. What you eat the next day carries that invisible burden. For the body, this translates into an increased inflammatory load. Chronic inflammation, accumulating slowly and quietly over years of small, repeated choices, is one of the primary drivers of the diseases most of us fear as we grow older. Cancer, dementia, heart disease. None of them arrive all at once. They build over time, from habits so ordinary we never think to question them. Cover everything. Every single container, every bowl, every plate, without exception. Proper lids, beeswax wraps, sealed glass containers. Make it a rule in your kitchen that nothing goes back in the refrigerator uncovered. It costs almost nothing. It takes no extra time, and it preserves both the nutritional value and the safety of food you've already taken the care to prepare. That care deserves to be protected all the way to the table. As we come to the end of this, I want to take a quiet moment with you, because I think most of us who are watching something like this are people who have spent a lifetime caring about food, about feeding the people we love, about doing it right, doing it well, doing it with attention and warmth. It can feel disorienting to realize that some of what we've done, with entirely good intentions, may not have served us as well as we believed. But here's what I keep returning to, and what I hope you'll hold on to as well. It is never too late to learn something new, and it is never too late to make a small, quiet change that protects the years still ahead of you. Processed meats used fresh and cooked gently rather than stored and reheated. Canned foods transferred to glass the moment the tin is opened. Fried food eaten fresh and not saved for another day. Cheese wrapped in wax paper and kept away from plastic. And everything in the refrigerator covered, always, without exception. These are not complicated medical interventions. They are small, practical acts of self-care, the kind that happen quietly in a kitchen, without fanfare, and accumulate into something meaningful over time. Have you already changed any of these habits? Or is there one here that surprised you the most? I'd genuinely love to hear about it. Leave a note in the comments if you feel like sharing. These small conversations, one person to another, matter more than I can easily say. There's a real kind of comfort in knowing we're all still learning, still adjusting, still choosing to take care of ourselves with whatever time and knowledge we have. Thank you for being here with me today. Truly, take good care of yourself. You have earned it more than you know.